Welcome to the Private Lenders Podcast with your hosts from Hard Money Bankers, Jason Balin and Chris Haddon. This podcast is sponsored by hardmoneymastermind.com.
Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the show. Real quick before we get started, we are finalizing the room for the Tampa Inner Circle meeting. It is November 7th and 8th. We are getting pretty close to full. If you haven't done so already and you want to look into it, schedule a time to talk to Dave, our program manager. Just visit hardmoneymastermindinnercircle.com to learn more. Okay, today we're talking about delegating inside a private lending business. What you can delegate, what you can. We're going to focus on the stuff that you can delegate because, frankly, there's just more of those things. Now, starting out, it's a good idea to do everything in the business as the owner, whether it's just you and a partner. It makes a lot of sense to do all of these tasks, even the more menial ones and, administrative ones at the beginning, just so you know it from the ground up. You could delegate later, but early on in HMB's history, Jason and I did all of it. From answering every phone call, sending every piece of mail, cutting every check, doing every inspection. That's an important one. And then over time, we learned what the right things to delegate were and how to do them. We're going to dive in.
Yeah, one of the challenging parts about this business related to learning it, scaling it, operating it is, your product isn't an ordinary product like a book or a course or a widget that you're just, selling and you don't really have much accountability for afterwards. If someone doesn't like your book, you give them their money back and it's not a huge deal. Well, you're selling money, right? You're selling an investment, right? That you're involved in. Like, it's your responsibility to make sure that you're writing a good loan. You're writing a good loan to a good borrower that's going to make the monthly payments. And it's great when a loan closes, right? You get your points, you get some other miscellaneous fees, you make some money, you deploy your capital, all really, really good things. But at the same time, like, you need the loan to pay off, right? If you write a few bad loans, you're out of business. So you got to take that seriously. And I think a lot of newer hard money lenders don't really fully grasp that, right? They make a few quick bucks and it's fine. And it's like, hey, these loans need to perform, right? And they need, you need to write good loans all the time and you got to learn from that. So we find it to be, it's hard to replicate some particular positions inside the business. I'm not saying you can't, but it's hard in order to do that. Like, who's going to make the underwriting decisions if this is a good deal or not a good deal? Yes, there's an underwriting metrics that you could potentially develop yourself. We've certainly developed one. You've developed some, but at the same time, it's like a gut feel, right? If we were all flipping a house, we might all sell it for different prices. We might all have different qualifications, might have all different credit. We might have all different backgrounds, assets, things like that. So it's a lot of different things. And I 100% agree with what Chris said is, we always recommend doing this, from scratch, from the beginning, doing all the heavy lifting yourself. And I know for anybody listening or watching that's just deploying their own capital and they have a good amount of money they want to throw at this, they don't necessarily want to hear that. I don't want to do ads. I don't want to go to RIA groups. I just want to hire this person. I want to hire this person. I don't want to be doing my books. And I get it. I get it. It's some of that stuff's not all that fun, but at the same time, it's hard to kind of develop the operation unless you kind of know what's going on, and it's not forever, right? Typically the first position that you're hiring or delegating is some sort of processor or somebody doing the keystrokes, because doing keystrokes is not all that much fun, right? And we're in a position in our business where we don't really have to do any keystrokes anymore, but there are certainly things in the business that we do. So maybe let's start kind of at the top, some of the highest level stuff. And then I was going to
start the other way.
You want to start at the bottom?
I kind of had it thought out. So a super common question, actually, every single inner circle meeting that we have somebody who's about ready to make their first or maybe second hire. Comes up every single meeting, right? And basically that means, what are the first things I should delegate? And so I think that we can start kind of at the easiest to delegate and then work up to the top. And we'll move these pretty quickly. We'll move through these pretty quickly because there's a number of them. So one common one that is oftentimes the first hire and that most entrepreneurs want to get rid of right away is accounting. Accounting for most people is tedious and annoying, and you don't really want to mess with it. I did HMB's accounting for about 2 years, learned QuickBooks doing that. I mean, shit, I learned accounting by doing HMB's QuickBooks, right? And I learned the structure from our CPA. I cut all the checks. I did all deposits, reconciles, and it was very beneficial to do that. I did not intend to keep that forever. I knew I was going to be passing that on. It was not the highest and best use of my time. And we got rid of that pretty quick. I got rid of that pretty quick. Another one jumping in is inspections. We did construction inspections and upfront inspections when we first started, but when you get to a little bit of scale, you just can't be everywhere every day, right? Especially if you're in a big metro area, like we're in DC Metro, DC and Baltimore. It takes half a day to go visit a couple properties. It really does. And at some point, you just can't do it anymore. And it makes sense to get someone qualified to pass that off to after you yourself are comfortable with the construction process, what things look like, all of that. Like, you know how to review a report and approve it. So you don't need to go there yourself. Somebody else.
And there's easy ways that if you're nervous about, QC, I mean, listen, we have a lot of QC stuff in place because, we hired people because we had a business coach early on, and we exceeded our goals pretty quickly by utilizing him. And a lot of that was us hiring staff that we were terrified to hire financially, and that we were scared that things would fall through the cracks. And we put quality control in place, to prevent that. And one of them was inspections, because I was used to going to every inspection and meeting every bar and going to every property and learning this and meeting the contractors and doing all that stuff. And it's hard to do. And by doing so, we were able to put things in place. Like, for example, go to the property, take a bunch of pictures, take some videos, meet the client. Then the client will come to our office, or we can do a Zoom call with the client afterwards. And in essence, they're your eyes and ears on the streets. Now, again, this is hard to do at the beginning, especially if it's an area you don't know. Like, learn the areas. I knew the areas. I would go and, I'd fact check some of the valuations and the due diligence on MLS to make sure the inspections were done correctly. So just things that you do, you kind of baby step into it. It's not like, hey, let's hire an inspector and he'll just tell us what the value of the property is and he'll take a bunch of pictures and I'm not going to do anything after that. Like, that's one extreme to the next. That wasn't the case. That's like, okay, cool. Well, let's manage the inspector.
All right, moving on. Let's talk about the hire. This is a big one in HMB's history, and probably is for other lending companies too. Hiring a processor, which we refer to in our operation as a portfolio manager, because it's a bit more built out than just loan processing and prepping for closing, which was an interesting process because we were working with a business coach at the time. Tony Mayo helped us with a lot of stuff when we were on the come up in the early years. And an important thing that he taught us is that if someone can do that job 80% as well as you can, that's good enough. And over time, they're going to become better than you ever were. You remember having that exact experience, Jay?
Yeah, absolutely. And, he said again, the 80% was the thing. Imagine if they could do it 80% as good as you and you don't have to do any work. Well, guess what? She can do it 110% better than me. And I don't have to do any work because she can do all the stuff and build it into things, because that's her focus every day, right? So she can build it into other things that I'm not capable of building it into, because that was 1/10 or 1/100th of my day working on that. And that's where the beauty comes.
No, for sure. I mean, that's a heavy workload, and like preparing files for closing, following a checklist to make sure everything's in there, coordinating with the attorneys and the title company to get deals done. That can be delegated. That can be delegated very well. There are people out there who do this likely better than you are as the owner.
Real quick story on that. 100% of folks in the inner circle group that are still in that position where they don't have a hire yet and they're still processing, and typically they're between like just under 5 to 10 million at that point. Mm-hmm. Some people do it much earlier, but like they're between 5 and 10 million deployed. They're like, I don't even want to talk to borrowers anymore. I don't even have time to talk to them. And I'm like, well, that doesn't make sense. You're not even talking to good prospects because you're so bogged down with
paperwork,
with paperwork. And I'm like, trust me, you do like talking to borrowers. You do like structuring deals. You like sales. You just think you don't right now because you can't get your mind focused on that part because you're doing paperwork and you're processing and stuff that, at that point of your business, you're overqualified for. You weren't overqualified for it at the beginning, but you're overqualified to do, and you need help. And that's a good indicator. If you're not taking sales calls, if you're not talking to borrowers, if you're not, attending market events because you're too busy processing leads, that's the problem. And what happened with me is I would be on the road looking at properties, on the phone with borrowers, doing sales calls, had notepads, had my notepad with me all the time, kind of like writing down, taking notes. And then I'd come back to the office, and late at night I would process the loans, right? Because we didn't have any employees at the time. And that's what it was. And you get bogged down.
All right, moving on. So now this next one that you can delegate is sort of delegate, but it's also about growth, and that's loan originators. One of the best ways that we've grown over time is by bringing on business partners / loan originators, and sometimes in different markets, sometimes overlap in our existing markets, to increase production. This is something, now we're not talking underwriting. Underwriting is like the next level and something you don't delegate, but originating, in essence, in the lending world means sales, right? Like you're prospecting, you're finding new potential borrowers, talking to them about deals, structuring deals, managing the relationship both during the life of the loan, in between loans, hopefully doing more for that same borrower. That all of that is what origination means in the lending world. And that is a great way to scale your company. The right people who can make contacts with good borrowers, bring deals your way, hopefully repeat borrowers and everything else, and make a really good living. If they're good at it, this is definitely a 6-figure position, and it makes you money as well. It makes that money, it makes you money. Done in the right way, an origination in general is a very smart thing to delegate.
Yeah. And I will disclose, I will tell you, and this, we could have this conversation on a different podcast, because it's a whole episode itself, but it is a hard position to find. It is a very hard position to find. And the reason why is you got to have a certain amount of volume for them, or they're just not going to make enough money. And then, somebody that's not making enough money is going to be the wrong person. And the person you want is going to need to make a lot of money. So you actually have to have deals. Like if you're doing 2 deals a month, you can't support that. Right. So it's a very, very hard position to fill. In our opinion, you probably got to be at least 10 million in production before you can kind of get that person involved, or which is another good option, is they can potentially double dip into other things inside the operation, originating, maybe doing property inspections for you. Maybe they're a borrower of yours and they have another, and you're lending them money and they're flipping some properties to make some additional income. But from our experience, they need to make 6 figures, or it's a hard person to find who's really going to be motivated. Because keep in mind, you got to go through a lot of deals to find the right deal, right? So it's hard work. It's hard work, and it's time consuming. And we've been through this before. Like we've had internal loan officers, external loan officers, brokers that refer to us deals, teams of people, lots of different, every variation, I should say. We had front desk admins that did like input, like an intake form on our behalf, and then we'd call them back if it was a good deal. We've tried a lot of stuff. Point being is I recommend doing this, like Chris said, the heavy lifting yourself. It's very high level to do the heavy lifting yourself at the beginning, because you're gonna create relationships, you're gonna meet people, you're gonna be able to underwrite / originate at the same time, right? Like there's, you can determine, if it's a good credit risk / build a relationship with them at the same time, and you learn a lot. What's out there. There was a point in our business where years back, we were at a good spot, then we took a little bit of a hiccup, and I went back into origination because I wanted to be back on the front lines to see what was going on, to help grow stuff back up, because I was curious why our sales guy at the time wasn't converting the way we wanted. And this was during institutional capital being in the space, but I wanted to be in the front line and seeing what was up. What were the questions people were asking? What was the competition offering? So just things to think about.
All right. Another good one to delegate is a marketing person. And we were actually just talking about that here in the office earlier today. It just so happens that we do a lot of our marketing ourselves, but that's mainly out of choice because we like it. We think it's important. Like if you get an email from hardmoneybankers.com or hardmoneymastermind.com, I wrote those. And we are considering, bringing some people on to help do more per week. But point being is like, we're still actively doing marketing stuff. Jason's still doing content, working on mailing pieces. We're doing paid traffic campaigns, and we monitor a lot of this ourselves. Some of it's outsourced, social media posts, stuff like that. We're shooting podcasts, a couple different ones. We do a lot of it ourselves, but we don't necessarily have to. That can be an easy one to delegate to the right person and really load them up with the right stuff, with the email broadcast, with the paid traffic campaign, ongoing SEO and content on your website, social content. You can really load up a marketing person if you know what you're doing, but it also needs to be the right person. It's not an inexpensive hire. Like if you get somebody, that's paid kind of low, like 40, 50 grand, something like that, which marketing people, would take a job in that salary range, but they're probably not going to be too good. They're probably just going to like do the basic keystrokes and this and that. And if you don't tell them exactly what to do, then they'll just sit there. Whereas if you're talking about somebody who's 80, 90, 100, then you're getting someone skilled who can launch and run and optimize campaigns, put together proper reporting and the right kind of feedback to you as the owner, and really scale a small business.
Yeah, we and even though we don't have that person right now, because we do a lot of this stuff ourselves, because we enjoy it. We've had that position before, and it is a hard position to manage because, it's if you own a business, and you probably know this, if the last thing you want is you to delegate something, they delegate it right back to you, meaning be like, well, how do I do that? Or what do you want me to post?
Yeah. You give them a job and they give it right back.
Just remember what the high level stuff is and what the delegated stuff is. Like all influencers, gurus, the brand of the business, they're the ones doing the content and speaking. So like inside our business, I shouldn't say that we do it all ourselves because we don't. We don't post on social media. A lot of the stuff is outsourced. We have a lot of VAs that are cutting videos for us and things like that. But the highest level part for us is cool. Chris and like for right now, Chris and I are going to jump on this podcast for 10 or 20 minutes. We're going to do it once or twice a week. And then everything else is going to get either syndicated to certain social media portals. It's going to get cut up into shorts, into reels, and things like that. Photos are going to get cut. Quotes are going to get posted onto Facebook, things like that. So the highest level part still has to be you doing that. Like you should be the one doing the content, but not necessarily dispersing it.
So as we wrap up here, guys, what are the 3 things that we did not mention to delegate? And those are the things that you don't delegate, which is underwriting, investor relations, and default management. Top level jobs. We suggest that the owner of the private lending company hold on to those forever, because real money's at risk here. You got to be careful with your money, with your investors' money. That's what it's all about, doing safe, profitable deals, making good money, definitely not losing any. We hope you guys got some good value from this and that it gave you a kind of a clear picture on the right stuff to delegate as you grow. We'll see you guys here next time on the Private Lenders Podcast. And until then, we'll see you inside hardmoneymastermind.com.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Private Lenders Podcast. Please note that the opinions stated by all the speakers on this show are only opinions and not intended for legal, financial, or accounting advice. Please make sure to always check with your own legal, accounting, and financial professionals. If you enjoyed this episode of the Private Lenders Podcast, we'd appreciate it if you would spread the word. Make sure to check out hardmoneymastermind.com, the #1 free community for new and experienced private and hard money lenders.